Beyond the Stage with Jimmy K.
Jayson Brinkworth is first and foremost a drummer. As if that weren't enough, he's also much more than that. He's a business owner, an educator, an industry builder, and an author. You may have read some of his articles in Modern Drummer. By the way, that's kind of the Bible for drummers. It is my immense pleasure to welcome Jayson Brinkworth to Beyond the Stage with Jimmy K.
Thank you so much for the invite, Jimmy. This is a huge treat to be surrounded by yourself and this podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, I mean, we're all people, and we're all just doing our thing, and that's why we're here. So I think this podcast is like a great little idea as to get people to talk about the industry and share some stories, and for people that are like coming up, they can learn a lot, and I always find it interesting anyway. So
that's the premise. That's the whole idea, is passing along information, whether it's some funny stories, some knowledge, some tips, and I credit to all the guys out there doing the podcast thing, because it's a big world, but you guys make it a little smaller so people can get that info from their own backyard.
It's not for it's not for everybody. It's not for the masses, right? I think the people that like to watch Friends a lot are probably not going to listen to this, and that's just fine by me.
Yeah, they could. We could be funny like Joey and Chandler. I think. I don't know.
Oh, sometimes I think we can be funnier, right?
True story.
You're both a live and a studio drummer. Why don't you start telling us by some of the artists that you've worked with?
I've been, growing up and still making my home in the middle of Canada, which is, some people think, the middle of nowhere. I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of artists. I've recorded with the likes of Jess Moskaluke, Canadian country artist. We played on a gold album, platinum single, Cheap Wine and Cigarettes. Shane Yellowbird had a couple number one singles in Canada.
Sure did.
Poverty Plainsman years ago, they did a remake of the old America tune. And there's just a whole bunch of different artists around town. Poor Nameless Boy, Chris Henderson. There's a lot of recording that goes on out here, and it's amazing how you get involved in these projects, and they're all different. It could be a folk record where I'm playing some hand drums and no drum kit at all. It could be another thing where it's full-on rock, heavy drum kit. It could be stuff where it's a drum kit and it morphs into playing with hands. It's just an open-minded sort of situation that we kind of run into out here, and it's not just pegged into one thing, which I really like. That diversity is part of, I think some of the benefit of having longevity in anything.
And it keeps it interesting as well, right?
100%, because you don't know, what call you might get, and what situation you might walk into, and what you might need to bring for tools, what drums or mentally to prepare for anything. So yeah, it keeps you on your toes for sure.
Cool. How old were you when you first started playing around and stuff in the house?
I started drum lessons when I was 13. But I do remember wanting to play for a long time before that. My grandma had always mentioned that I was around 5 when I would be at her house, and she saw that I would be playing on things, and the pots and pans, that old analogy. But it was true, and it just wasn't going to fit into our house. I know I had asked for a long time to play, and my parents had put me in guitar, I think, when I was 8 years old, and it wasn't really my thing. That wasn't what I wanted. Right. I wanted drums. I was an active kid. I played sports and everything too, but drums just seemed like it was going to be a fit for me. And I think finally, it was the first Saturday after I started grade 9. They were like, we've got to give this a try. And I think I'm pretty sure at first when they said, we got to give this a try, the novelty, they just thought the novelty will wear off. He'll play for a couple months. We'll put up with a bit of noise. It'll be fine. And then it'll just fade away, like most things do with kids.
Right.
But that wasn't the case.
So you had the perfect way to torture your parents for many years.
Well, I did. I did. And man, I don't know, how they put up with it, because I would play so much. And the neighbors, like even the neighbors would, and they wouldn't be upset about it, but they would comment. I would hear them mentioning to their parents about the drums and stuff, but they wouldn't be angry about it. But to me, it was just like, it was something I was doing, and they knew when I was home, they could hear me, and they knew I wasn't getting into trouble and stuff. And I don't know, it just seemed to just be a connection. The physical, mental side of playing music and playing drums was a fit for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the way everybody needs to find their own way, needs to find the thing that gets them excited, right? Because if you're, learning an instrument that you don't really like, it's not going to go very far, right?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, no, and that's I was very fortunate that my parents would be, they thought that way, where they would let me play, if I was interested in a sport, they'd let me try it and stuff, and weed out sort of what you don't like. That's what the age of 10 to 25 sort of teaches you is, you're learning about things you do and don't like in life that you might want to or not want to do.
Right.
And,
for sure.
And I was very fortunate that they even put me into that first drum lesson, because, we wouldn't be having this conversation, I don't think.
Right,
maybe we'd be
it,
talking about something else.
For sure. As a good Canadian boy, did you play some hockey as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I had played hockey since I was 8 years old and loved it. I still love the game. It's an amazing sport. It teaches us a lot of lessons. I think music and sports can teach people most things in life. Teamwork, self-discipline, working at something, cooperating. There's just a lot of lessons that go on with that. But yeah, hockey was a big thing. I was a gigantic Wayne Gretzky fan.
Were you a goalie?
No.
It's always
so funny.
I always thought that drummers would make really good goalies, because the independence of the two legs and the two arms. That's kind of what being a goalie is all about, I would think.
Well, I'm
not a hockey player, right? I just like to watch, but I always kind of thought that's drummers would probably make really good goalies, right?
That's such a great analogy, and I've used that analogy before. And actually, I have right now with my students that play hockey. I have quite a few students that play hockey, but 3 of them are goalies. And it's really funny that they chose drums, and it's funny because if you look at the goalie on a team, they're kind of the outcast, they're the guy standing back there and getting pucks shot at him at 100 miles an hour. And who would make that choice to do that?
A drummer would.
Exactly. It's like being on a gig, and it's like, man, the drummer's just getting all this grief. People saying he's playing too loud. Oh, he's having a tempo tantrum. He's speeding up and slowing down everywhere. You're getting grief. And if the gig goes great, everybody goes, hey, good job. But if you lose the game as a goalie, everybody's all over you. And it's like, oh, man. That's just the life of the drummer, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember seeing an interview with Phil Collins where he talked about being a drummer before he stepped up to do the vocals for Genesis, right? Mm-hmm. And he said I always wanted to have the most respectable job in the band, which is the job of the drummer. And we're like, I don't think anybody else really looks at it that way.
That's very true. That's very true. That would just be a drummer saying that about drummers. That makes so much sense. And Phil, come on, it's Phil Collins, man. He's so good. He's brilliant.
Yeah, great drummer. And
I love that. I've never heard that comment before. I'm gonna have to keep that in my back pocket.
Yeah, that's a great one. And you know what? He was doing stuff. I don't know if you listened to any of the Brand X stuff that he was doing, right?
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean that was some serious drumming going on there, right?
His playing, I still use that Genesis Abacab record in lessons,
right?
Just for certain things that he did that were just so good, and he's a phenomenal musician. He's an incredible talent that the world is lucky to have a guy like that walk the earth. And then the guy lived in Canada for a long time.
For sure.
I don't know if he was a Canadian citizen at all, but
he had a Canadian
he made his
wife,
home in Vancouver.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
He married a Canadian girl there and spent a lot of time here. Well,
yeah.
I think Paul Rogers lives out in Vancouver too, right?
That's right. Yeah, we did a gig years ago with Aaron. We did a gig in Nakusp, BC, and we actually opened for Paul Rogers.
Oh, cool!
And it was an amazing. He was such a nice guy, and Howard Leese was playing guitar. Who played with Heart for years, and they were the nicest human beings on the planet. And we were just standing there watching Paul Rogers, and it was right when he started doing some of the gigs with Queen. Right. And we're just sitting watching him do those classic rock tunes and just going, this is it. This is rock star 101.
You know what? I think when it comes to like rock voices, like the really true rock voices, there is him and Glenn Hughes. I mean, I think those are the two animals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the thing is, you stand there, and I can't remember how old he would have been at that point, but we're standing side stage watching him, and it sounds like the record. It's just like, man, he sings like that's probably exactly how it sounded in the studio when they recorded it in like 74 or whenever it would have been, right? It's like, man, and then they get off stage, and then they come over, and they're like the nicest people, and you'd never know that they even played music. You'd be like, were these people in the crowd for the show? Or, it's like, wow, I love that. I love that, someone can just separate from the, they just go out and be this rock star, and then all of a sudden they turn it off because they aren't the rock star anymore, really.
Right. That lasts for so long on stage, right?
Well, that's true, right? That's that's just ego. That's turning that off and knowing when to, when you are in that moment, when you're not, and when you're not, you're actually really not because, now you're just another dude walking around, hanging out with everybody else.
That's right. Well, because and that's always like kind of the approach that I took when I want to work with people is they're just people, right? And the vast majority of artists, they just want to have a normal conversation. I mean, yes, I think they all like the adoration, but it gets tiresome after a while too. So I think for a lot of people that are in that situation, they just like to have like a normal everyday conversation where it's not just all, oh, you're the best and you're the greatest and I love you, and it's like, they just want to talk about normal stuff, right?
Absolutely. That's so true. Like I remember years ago, not to lengthen this thing, but there was a story years ago. I ended up going to a sound check in town, and there was a few bands that were playing, and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band was playing in town, and Jimmy Fadden's the drummer, and I think the Desert Rose Band was on the gig, and so it was three big country acts, and the drummers were great drummers. Billy Hill was playing. Martin Parker was the drummer of that band who played with Vince Gill for years. Anyways, I was at the sound check and just standing, and these guys were talking and stuff, and I was just listening to the conversation, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to get so much drum info. It's going to be unbelievable. And these guys are talking about redecorating their kitchen and what kind of cabinets they're getting, and I'm like, but guys, what about the drums? Like, and they're like, but we'll play those today. That's later on. Like we're just hanging out and stuff. And it just blew my mind. I was like, oh, you do talk about real life things. Like, this is normal. It's like, well, of course you do. That's it's not always, oh, this kick drum, this, oh yeah, I've got this, I'm using these heads and stuff. It's like, no, man, that's the music side.
You know what?
Real life side.
I think there's some guys that do that, but they're really in the minority, right? They're like the obsessed ones, right? So
and that's okay. That's okay. If you're into something, you're in, and that's fantastic. But man, that's just amazing that you just shut it off, and then real life happens, and then the equality and everything is just everybody's level. Everybody's on the same page, and it's like, okay, for our 90 minutes tonight, I get to sit up there and play music. Yeah. And these thousands of people don't. But once I'm done, it's over till the next day.
Yeah. Hang it up in the closet and move on, right?
That's exactly right.
I've seen it with a lot of artists too that are like the frontline person, where they actually have like a character that they go into.
Yeah.
Right. They really need to like I've seen quite a few people that spend like a lot of time transforming. They don't want to talk to anybody for like 45 minutes before they go on, and you can really see they're like a completely different person on stage.
Yeah.
And it's like really all a character.
Yeah.
And
well, it's kind of acting. You know what I mean? Like if you're the vocalist, man, you've got a performance, and if you've got to hold 20,000 people in the palm of your hand for 90 minutes, that's a hard job.
Yeah, it is a hard job. Yeah.
And you definitely have to be in the right frame of mind. You definitely have to be, you have a responsibility to deliver, I guess, that thing. It'd be like, just putting Kiss up there and going, okay, guys, no makeup and stuff, and you can't jump around, and you can't, it's like, well, now you've just sucked the life out of everything that show might have been.
That's what Kiss is, yeah.
That's exactly right. That's the whole idea is that, and that's what people go to see them. They want to see that performance and that, And
I
Gene,
don't think
whatever you do, don't stick out your tongue. It's like, well, now you've cut down half of his show.
Yeah, I don't think anybody goes to Kiss for the great music.
No, man, no, they're not. No one's
show.
going. No, yeah, exactly. No one's there with a notepad going, "Oh man, that wasn't what he played on the record." If he played on the record. So yeah, no, that's a big part of it, and everybody in the band sort of responsible for that too. I know even when I play, when we're playing, it's there's got to be eye contact with the people. You can't be up there, looking like you're just phoning it in and stuff. And it's like, no, there's got to be excitement because that's what they want. They paid money to be there, and they want to have an experience, an emotional experience, and be excited. And when they leave, feel like that kind of took them out of their normal day, which could have been an awful day for the amount of time you played, and everybody in the band holds weight on that to kind of go, what, we can connect with these people. All of us could, and we talk about that with Aaron with the show, and it's it's a big part of it is making sure that he's not the only one carrying all the load. Everybody's responsible to to be up there doing everything they can to let us have a good musical show, but make sure that people have a great emotional experience for the show.
I can give you a great example. I went to see quite a few years ago. I went to see a triple bill, and it was Dream Theater, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Deep Purple.
Holy smokes!
It was quite the triple bill, and Dream Theater came out first, and they did their thing, absolutely fantastic, musical craziness, right? Fantastic, great. And then Emerson, Lake and Palmer came out, and it was extremely obvious that these guys were just there because they were on a cash run, right? They ran out of money and they had to be there and absolutely didn't want to be there, right? It was terrible. And then Deep Purple came out, and that was John Lord was still alive then, and was Steve Morris was there, right? And those guys had so much fun. They literally, and you could see it. They were just smiling ear to ear, and they were edging each other on. And Steve Morris and John Lord were, just playing off one another and just grinning from eye to eye. And they were moving around the stage with more energy than a lot of bands in their 20s. And it was just like, wow, right? But what a bill to see, like the three completely different elements there, right?
No kidding.
Yeah, but I'll never forget that, and I've seen a lot of times when musicians have a good time on stage, it really translates onto the crowd.
Yeah, 100%, and especially when you see something like that where it's musicians that they're not younger guys; they've been doing it long enough. They're Deep Purple. People could go see Deep Purple and say they saw Deep Purple, but maybe it wasn't a great show. But to see that is like it's like years ago I saw Fogerty do it. It was not too long ago. It was like maybe 8-9 years ago, and man, it just blew my mind. I was like, this guy looks like this is his first gig ever. How does he do that? Like how do you when you're in your 60s go on stage every night and fool the people that it's like your first gig ever, and it's like, well, you're not fooling the people. It's just honest. That's just who you are. That's just what you do. You
know what? Sammy Hagar made a career out of it. Right?
Absolutely.
And this whole party thing.
And it's still going.
Yeah, and like he's in his 70s, and he's sounding great. He can still hit the notes, and but you know what? This whole persona as to like getting drunk and all that. He has a couple of drinks while he's on stage, but he's not getting loaded, right? And when he does all this, like when he does his own thing and does like the tequila and taking the sip, and the girls are mixing him the drinks, right? And then he takes one little sip, the rest of it he throws in the crowd, right?
Absolutely.
He can't get hammered because A, he can't perform, and B, he's way too old for that, right?
Jeez.
So, he's built a career around having a good time, and he's bringing the party. Right.
Yeah.
And
Sammy Hagar's a brilliant businessman.
Fantastic businessman.
I remember reading his autobiography, and it was stunning, all the things he had done outside of music that blew my mind. I was
the
like,
sprinkler systems and all this stuff.
Exactly. And I was like, no wonder this guy is doing what he does. And he's got the tequila company. He sells the stuff. He doesn't have to drink it.
Yeah, and that was the best part. He sold it. I think he sold the tequila company for $80 million, and he remained the chairman of the board.
Absolutely.
How do you pull that off?
Exactly. Yeah. What musician could do that? Like, if you could do that in the music industry, holy smokes.
Yeah.
But no, he was, and I remember seeing, just speaking of him, because he is amazing. There was this show live at Daryl's house with Daryl Hall.
Yeah.
And Sammy Hagar was on an episode, and they were having the best time. But when they sang together, it was insane. And it was like, no kid could touch these guys. Like, there's no young vocalist that could ever touch these guys. And I was like, I wonder I was curious how old they were in this episode. And I looked it up. And one of them, I can't remember the order, one of them was 68 and one was 70 when they did the episode.
Right.
And they were just shredding it. And I was like, that's experience. Like, that's
experience. And
that's
and
whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Whatever they're doing, everybody should study that, because that's it. That's the whole idea.
I worked with Sammy Hagar and with Chickenfoot.
No way.
Yeah, and nicest guy you'll ever meet. And he was fully in charge of that outfit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they did it, but it was all like his people, his philosophy, and it's all about having a good time. Don't want to hear any BS, no nothing. And these guys,
man, it works.
Unbelievable, and they just went out there and they had fun. And a band like that, that just all the guys that are in the band, like Chad Smith, and Joe Satriani, and Michael Anthony, it's a band of, it could be a band of a lot of egos, and there could be a lot of problems. Yeah.
But man, that
none of it.
Problems, absolutely. That's
Zero.
Amazing to hear that.
Zero zilch, like no problems. I mean, that was their fun project, and they completely self-financed that. So they finance everything, the touring. Like, I actually got them to tour because I was doing like a thing for the military, and they weren't touring or anything. And so I contacted the manager, and I sent them a letter. And he said that it would be great for you guys to come out, and it's the military, and there's also going to be a live feed going to the troops in Afghanistan and all that stuff. And they said, we're fucking doing it. Right.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's how it all started. Yeah.
Man, that's so cool, because I love that project. That thing is those records are so good.
Yeah.
Like, you're such a great rock band.
Yeah, and that was like on the first record, right? So that was like the very first tour and the very first date.
Man,
so, yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty amazing.
I always thought I'd love to see those guys. That was just such a great lineup. Well, obviously Sammy Hagar and Michael Anthony singing together, but Joe Satriani, just playing, it's like, man, he's a guitar shred guy. But in that band, he was just a guitar rock guy that fit in perfectly. And Chad Smith, played a lot different than he does in the Chili Peppers, but it sounded so great.
And you know
it
what?
Just worked.
If you stand like, 10 feet away from Chad Smith, does he ever pound the shit out of the drums?
Oh, yeah. He gets all the sound out of him.
God, but he's just like, the attack that he has is like unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And the intent too, like, just that's his whole thing, is when you hear him play, well, know it's him. He has a real style too. But man, he places every note exactly where it needs to be, and he means it. He's not kidding around.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. I love that story, man. And any story like of any artist that's been around forever, and they don't ever take it for granted or phone it in. I love that. Because there's so many that do.
Because I think I think for most of them, they've lost some of it at one point, and then they came back, right? Right. And that's what humbles people. Totally, exactly. And whether you're coming back for, if the fans want it, if it's a financial thing or whatever, but you just got to keep it all in check, and you've always got to remember why you started. I think that's important. You always need these reminders. Right. Something someone saying something or something happening to go, oh right, that's why I started playing music. That was the first thing, and it wasn't about any of this that's going on right now at all. Yeah, and there are some acts and some musicians that like will literally only do it for the money. Yeah. And then there's guys like these guys that we've been talking about that are doing it because they just want to. Right? Yeah, exactly. They don't have to. Like, none of the guys in Chickenfoot needed that project. Right.
No.
They're all doing pretty good on their own, right?
Absolutely. And you look at, a guy like Sammy Hagar, and, he's got his ducks in a row. The financial side of things, he's got everything lined up. It's not like, he made some bad choices and all of a sudden he's running, every $100 means something to him. So it's not like he's desperate. So he can pick and choose what he'd like to do and put together bands like that, or the new band, The Circle, and do things that he actually wants to do. Mm-hmm. And then you do it honestly, right? Yeah. And it definitely comes across.
It sure does. So let's get back to you. At what point did you know that this is kind of cool? I think I can make a living off of this.
That's funny because it was kind of clouded for a while. When I got out of high school, I obviously played in different bands and had a few opportunities that were really great. Playing with some older musicians, had a great drum teacher, a great band instructor in high school who took a few of us under his wing and really taught us a lot about music theory, which we thought was crazy, but it benefited years down the road. And when I got out of high school, I thought, I'm going to go on the road and play, and that was sort of the path you take. There was no internet or anything at that point, so you either learned at home through books and stuff, or you just went out and got experience. So I went on the road and played for a while, and was in a couple situations that weren't the most favorable with people that taught me a lot of lessons about being a human being or not being a human being, and came back home and went to school for electronics. I came back home and I was like, you know what? I could still play music, but I don't know that this has to be the only thing, just because these situations were starting to jade me a little bit, and I didn't like that at all. I didn't like kind of how that was making me feel about music. So I came home and went to school, and then through my 20s, I had 2 children and stuff, and so you allocate time to that. But was still playing in some bands around town and doing some recording and a little bit of teaching. But it wasn't like the first thing now. It had faded back a bit, which was fine. I was totally cool with that. And then around 30, things changed in my life. My wife and I split up and stuff, and which was fine. It was for the reasons I think it needed to be. But the reason was when in my late 20s, my job that I had fixing office equipment, we always wanted one of us to stay home with our kids. So we decided that I would be the one that would stay home with the kids. So I had quit my job and stayed home with the kids, being Mr. Mom, and I loved it. But all of a sudden, the phone started ringing because now people knew that I was available. I didn't have this job, right, and I could do gigs and stuff. So the phone started ringing. So that schedule picked up, and at that point, I thought, well, wait a minute, this is all turning around now. Now this is coming to the forefront again. And if I'm 30, I don't want to live in the what ifs when I'm 50 and not give this a shot. I can't, I don't think I could do that to myself. So that situation changed some things, but I decided, you know what, I've got to really, go full ass in on this and give it a shot at least. And if it all falls apart and doesn't work out, I could go back to fixing office equipment. I could do other stuff. I could be resourceful. I've got no problem with, just going to get a job. That's fine. I'll provide for what I need. And then after that, the things started to change. It quickly sort of escalated that other opportunities came up and things. So it was probably, when I was 18, I wanted to do this for a living. When I was 30, I needed to do this for a living. Right. And there was a lot of learning in that 12 years that kind of got me to that point. So it wasn't like, and I don't know that I don't know, and I've thought about this a bit too, and I don't know that I'd approach how the industry works and everything that I do now the same if I just had have continued on from 18 to now.
Probably not would be the answer.
That would be my guess. I think that. Yeah, I think that because I think those lessons I learned in those 12 years really taught me and informed me on how I make decisions about things now. And I think that was very important. And, I'm never one to like look back in the past and dwell on that and, celebrate anything that went on in the past. It's like, no, man, we're in the now and the future. I can't do anything about that.
Right.
But yeah, it is kind of interesting when you do look back and go, man, that decision ended up being a good decision. And at the time, you didn't know if it was a good decision or the worst decision you might make in your life.
For sure.
But that's, I think
at some point,
I
think everybody at some point just needs to roll the dice, right? Because there is no, unless you get an offer from somebody and they put you on retainer, but that doesn't happen when you first start. That happens further down in the career, maybe. Right.
Maybe, exactly.
Maybe if you're real lucky. But at some point, you just got to roll the dice, right? And I think every musician or everybody working in the industry is kind of the same.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're exactly right. There's always stories of these experiences that, this thing changed that or whatever, or they made this choice. And that's comforting to be around, just to know that these people that were around, like talking to you and others, is kind of going, hey, my story resonates with these people. They kind of get what's going on. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it's not saying anything different, but if you've had the same job from 18 to 65, you probably haven't made a lot of decisions.
You don't roll the dice a lot.
Make or break. Exactly. No, and that's fine too. That's great. But I just think certain people are built to do that and take some chances and try things. And then if you fall flat on your face, you go, oh well, and you just pick yourself up and dust yourself off and keep moving on.
Yeah, and like most musicians know, money isn't everything, right?
Well, that's huge. They could think, you could think that. But man, that is not the motivator to do anything. It shouldn't be. Obviously, you need the resources to be able to do stuff.
Right.
But it can't be the one and only reason you do this.
Yeah, and I think especially today, I mean, where the live industry, even before the pandemic, had shrunk to next to nothing. It's not like he could just could even go out and tour for like 10 months out of the year, right? It's very different now. So I think the rolling the dice is even more so the case now than back then, because back then you could literally tour even in a cover band, as long as the cover band was good. You could tour from coast to coast.
Yeah, well, even in my experience being 19, if the cover band was bad, you can still play. you can still play it. You can still play and make money, because there was so much. Like playing 6 nights a week, and
right.
And then driving Sunday and setting up Sunday night or Monday morning and just playing another 6 nights a week, and that was the best part. Like that was the biggest lesson, and that'll never come back. That won't ever be a thing again.
Come back.
No, which I was really glad that I got to be part of that, because that really, really refines your playing and your everything.
Yeah.
But again, that lesson on the road, man, that sure taught me. I learned a lot about music on the road, but I learned a lot about people and myself on the road, and those are lessons that are like huge now.
I think you learn also a lot what you want and what you don't want, and sometimes knowing what you don't want is more important than knowing what you do want, because
exactly. Well, the earlier in life you can figure that out, the better off you'll be later on.
It you know what, in my experience, it doesn't change. Like I'm still thinking about stuff like, well, that's not important to me anymore, right? So it was important to me 10 years ago. Now I couldn't care less. So
right.
Why would I do this now? So it's an ongoing process, but I find it's more about things that, like, I really don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And those that wisdom that you gain through that is super important. And that's, like conversations like this, if I was a younger player hearing stuff like this, maybe those lines wouldn't really resonate with me, but man, I would hope it would, because that's a huge lesson, is just kind of figuring that out.
Yeah, it is. And that's, that's probably one of the biggest things to learn is, even if it does change, but like what you don't want.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and even as a player, like even just understanding how you what you deliver as a player. I think there's a lot of musicians, it doesn't matter what instrument you play, but they're playing and they're on online shredding and doing all this stuff, and they don't even really know what they're wanting to get out of music or whatever. They just know that they just want to play a bunch, and it's like, No, man, just find a way that you play, that you're comfortable in your own skin, and then go with that. And be cool with that at the end of every day and go, well, this is what I do. This is how I do it. And nothing else matters, really.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Why don't we take a quick break, and then we'll go back and talk about you opening up a school.
It sounds great to me.
If you're an artist or you represent a festival or event and you need some professional advice, check this out. I'm now offering virtual one-on-one consulting sessions for artists. Ask me anything about your career, about the people that want to represent you, about what to look out for, about the contract somebody wants you to sign, about anything at all career related. For events, about planning issues, about cost overruns, about staffing issues, about implementation, about sponsorships. Ask anything event or festival related. No commitment, no subscription, no contracts, no strings, no risk. Just straight up advice on your terms when you want and need it. Your introductory session via Skype, Zoom, or FaceTime is free. Go to realjimmyk.com for all the details. That's realjimmyk.com. So at some point, Jayson, you decided to take your teaching a little bit further and decided to open up a school. How did that all come about?
Well, in early 2000s, from 2000 to till 2002, I was teaching privately. I'd been renting a room in town, teaching private lessons. And a friend of mine,
most drummers do.
Exactly. Yeah. You just have some space and teach. And the teaching thing I've always loved. I started doing that when I was in grade 12 and was obviously at that point, very, very underqualified to teach, but a place needed a teacher. And again, I learned a lot of lessons from doing that. And I love teaching. The education side of music is huge. I'm totally in on that. I think it's an amazing thing that kids get to play and someone can pass along knowledge. So
the passing on of the torch is really something that's a very, very cool thing.
It's necessary. Like, it's a responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, if someone has a gift, whether it's music or art or anything at all, the first thing you should do is share it with everybody. You don't need to keep it. You can't keep it, right? Because I agree. When you're in your 80s, what has that done for you to keep it? You got to share it. So in 2002, a friend of mine who, back to high school when I started taking music lessons at the place I was taking drums at, I was in this band program, and the gentleman who ran the band program, his name's Ray Bell, and Ray was older than myself, but we were friends, and we did a lot of stuff through high school, and I ended up playing in bands with him and doing a bunch of things. And in 2002, he was teaching at a place and wasn't super happy with how it was going. I was just renting a room. There was another a friend of his was a fiddle player in town. She had moved out here from Vancouver, and the three of us thought, why don't we just collectively get rooms at the same place? Like, why don't we so we had looked around and we found a house downtown that had space that we could use that was perfect. It was actually an old there was a film an audio editing film in the film industry. They had this house set up, and they had these rooms sectioned off with double pane glass, and they were sort of soundproof and stuff. And these people had bought the house, and it was perfect. So the three of us just rented the rooms, 3 rooms, and kind of got our student base built up. So that started in 2002, and we decided to call it Music in the House. And we just started doing it. There was no there wasn't even an option of going, well, you know what, in a few years when we're here, it was like, no, we just wanted a place to teach. There was no real plan going into it. And then the fiddle teacher had moved back to Vancouver. So Ray and I were the sole business owners. And then we just kept moving ahead. And then we added, in 2004, we added another drum teacher because there was quite a few drum students. And then we started adding a few more guitar teachers. And it just kind of built up in a way that wasn't even really planned. And now, 18 years later, I think there's 17 or 18 teachers right now, and I think we have, cool. I don't know if we have 350 students a week that come through, which is pretty good. It's a nice, comfortable house. It's it's a 100-year-old character home downtown in Regina, kind of by the park. And it's a great location, and it's a kind of a unique setting. It's not in a basement with no windows. There's a lot of natural light coming through, and it's a really cool vibe walking in there. And I still feel that. Like, even 18 years later, I still walk into the house and go, man, I feel something here as I'm walking in. And I just think, well, a 10-year-old kid has to get that too, whether, he understands it or not. But I'm sure he walks in, and even if he's had a bad day, he just kind of looks around and goes, oh, yeah, right, there's that guy learning piano. Oh, the drums, I hear that,
Yep.
And yeah, so that's it. It just kind of started.
It's full of life, right?
It is. You're exactly right. That's exactly what it is. And the whole idea of it being called Music in the House. And there's a lot of little things that have sort of added up over the years that we're like, we couldn't have planned that. Like,
right.
We never thought of it that way, but it just worked out that way.
So how challenging was this to run the business alongside with your drumming career, or did you just take a step back from that?
That's really funny because it just kind of worked. Like,
just
there's moments like in the last few years, some playing things got busy. Like last year with Aaron, we were out. We did two tours across Canada, of which we were gone for. The first was a stretch of 6 weeks, and the second one was 5 weeks. And they're during teaching, so I had another teacher come in and sub for my students, and doing lesson plans. So obviously there's some planning and thinking ahead and those kind of things. But it doesn't disrupt too much. Like a lot of gigs that I do, there's not a lot of weekday stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And I primarily teach Monday to Wednesday, so it doesn't disrupt a lot of things. And my students also understand, and the parents also understand that if things get disrupted, they're kept informed well in advance. Mm-hmm. They know what's going on, and they also know that what's going on is me going to play or do something in the music industry that's going to end up coming back to their lessons somehow in information, through an experience, through something, it's going to come back to that.
In other words, it just means that you're very organized.
Well, I try to be. No, I know it's early when we're doing this, and my family's inside sleeping. But if you were to say that to them, they'd be like, I don't think you were talking to the same guy, because that's not it at all. I try to be. I make a lot of lists. I'm a list guy. I love making a list and checking stuff off, and I do that. And I just try to stay on top of things. And there are a bunch of, balls being juggled at one time in things, because I'm, I just can't say no to stuff, so I keep things going, but which is fine. That's part of this industry too, right?
Of course.
And you just try to be as organized as you can, and just try to communicate with people the best that you can, and let people know what's going on, and give them a heads up, and have no surprises, and
for sure.
Especially running a business, because you have to, like it's a service thing, so they could all, if you're not doing your job, they could just easily go, we're not coming back for lessons. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. How did the modern drummer thing materialize?
Oh man. Well, yeah. First of all, modern drummer, like, man, that's like Sports Illustrated.
No, that's the Bible, right?
It kind of is.
It is the Bible for drummers. Yeah.
They've been around for a long, long time. Ron Spagnardi started the magazine. I think the first published issue was 1977, and that family still works like crazy at it. So in 2000, and this is actually funny. I always explain this, that I went through life, and there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity, and I'm walking, one foot's on bravery and then the next one's on stupidity, and every day I just go back and forth all the time with the choices I make. And I know it sounds extreme, but just things I do, it won't faze me, and this is exactly one of them. So this kid on the prairies in 2005, so in Modern Drummer, they always had this, not always, but for a while, they had this part of the magazine. It was called On the Move, and it was about up-and-coming players and stuff. And it was always like this segment that have three guys and stuff. And I always thought, man, that's really kind of cool. And in 2005, I had been doing a few things, some recording and stuff. And obviously in my mind thought, this is valid. This is worth, people knowing about me. Why I would think that, I don't know. So to submit this thing for the On the Move, you had to actually, print out your bio, have an 8x10 photo. Like, this is, sort of pre-internet, because you had to mail this to the magazine in New Jersey. So I had to put this package together in an envelope, mail it to New Jersey to Mike Dawson, who is one of the writers, and then they review it. And for some reason, I have no idea why. Maybe I slipped $100 in there. I don't know what I did. But for some reason, he got back to me and said, yeah, man, in the April issue of Modern Drummer, we're going to put you in the On the Move thing. And I was like, whoa, that's insane. I can't actually believe that.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
So the article comes, the magazine comes out and blows my mind. But the best part about it is, and I'm looking at it, I actually have it framed on the wall. It's an issue about drum solos, which I couldn't be more anti-drum solo because it's not my thing. It's not what I do. But Neil Peart is on the cover of the magazine.
Right.
So I'm like, wait a minute. There's a piece on me in this thing, which nobody in the world is going to read. But it didn't matter in my mind. And Neil Peart's on the cover. And I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. So Mike Dawson is the writer and he had just started at Modern Drummer, I believe, at that point, not long before that. And he did the piece. And since then, I've just kind of kept in touch with him. I've just kind of reached out and said, hey, man, thanks again for this and that. And then in 2011, he just wrote me and said, if you ever have any articles or you ever have any teaching things that you want to submit for us to review and possibly put in the magazine, just let me know. And I was like, what? You kid,
right.
You're joking me, right? You're not realizing that, this industry is built on relationships and this is how the whole thing goes, right? And at no point am I sucking up to this guy. I don't know this guy. I've never met Mike Dawson, actually. But Mike Dawson obviously knows.
But he did a piece on you, right? So
yeah, totally.
So you have that relationship.
That's exactly right. So then in 2000 and I believe it was 14, there was a piece that I had sent in, and he was like, we're going to put this in the magazine, and I was like it's going to be printed in there with my name on it, like I did this, and I was like, oh my goodness, like people are going to someone's going to read this, and they're going to go, okay, this guy's full of shit because this article does this thing doesn't even make sense. Why are they publishing this, right? And the feedback on it was amazing. It was incredible. And then they sent me a check, and I was like, wait a minute. I just got a check from Modern Drummer. Are you kidding me? And since then, I've had 6 published and have more sort of in the queue of their thing.
Right.
Because there's a lot of guys that write for him. But, every once in a while, Mike Dawson will just send me a message and, reach out and go, hey, man, how you doing? And then other editors, too, like Billy Amendola and Willie Rose and stuff. They'll keep in touch like I'm one of them. And I'm like, what? Yeah, it's crazy.
See, I love this story, right? Because it's you never know, and sometimes you just gotta throw enough shit up against the wall and see what sticks, right?
It's true.
And then it becomes like a matter of like follow through and all that type of stuff.
It is, and it's.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that's such a great story, right? Because it's you knock on some doors and you never know who's behind that door. Right, and
totally,
and that's what people need to do, right? Look, you and I didn't know each other. We're just meeting each other for the first time. Our paths have never crossed, even though they probably should have. But it's the comic Stephen Wright had a great saying that's really stuck with me. He says it's a small world, but I wouldn't want to paint it. And
he is one of my favorites. Yeah, I love that guy.
And I think it's like so true, right? And I find the music industry is like that, right? It's a really, really small world, but still pretty huge, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why, for example, you and I don't think have ever met before, but this is most likely not the last time that you and I are ever going to talk, right?
Absolutely not. No, not at all.
And
that's the truth, and that's the beauty of the music industry. Like a lot of people, kind of get down on it and stuff. And I just think, man, I value all these relationships and all these people that I trust. Yeah. I really, really admire what they do. I respect what they do. And just that handful of people that it is, because it is a big industry, but like you say, it's not that big. That's an important thing to understand. Is just I don't think there's another industry out there
where you make lifelong friends, right? I mean, you can have somebody you haven't talked to in 20 years, and you pick up the phone, and it's just like you talked to them last week.
Yeah.
Right. And I've always loved that about the industry. That's I think my absolute favorite part.
Absolutely. Guaranteed.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I agree. And I know, like, even with the pandemic, like, even just, a couple months and everything changing kind of almost overnight, especially in this industry, it really got flipped upside down.
Yes.
And stuff. And just talking to friends, reaching out, via, Skype, phone calls, whatever. Those relationships are valued because those people are, you want to make sure everybody's okay and stuff, because some people's worlds really got flipped around. And you sure go, man, who's all in my corner? Who would I go in the trenches with? Who would, and then you kind of go, wait, I'm surrounded by all the right people that are, in this whole thing with me, which is great, which is amazing.
Yeah, it is. And everybody's affected by it, and everybody's affected in different ways. And then ultimately it really comes down to what are you going to do about it, because nobody's going to do anything for you. Right.
Exactly. The playing field's all level now.
Yeah, and nobody really knows what's going to happen next. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that the live industry will come back. Probably not as soon as everybody would like, but it will come back. And I think when it comes back, it will come back with a vengeance, because like people are just so bored stiff that they'll just want to go see anything.
Yeah,
right?
I think you're right, and I think when it does come back, not that a lot of people took things for granted or any of that. I'm not saying anybody really did. Some did, but I'm not pointing it out. But I think when it does come back, I think a lot of people will look at going and playing a show differently, or being able to go play live music. I think everybody should just value it a little bit more and go, you know what, this could be taken away in 24 hours. Remember when it did that? Because we don't have a remember when now. Right. There was no remember when, but now we have one, and we always have to go, right, this could go away. So really, make this the best. And don't, I think the shows will get better. I think everybody will just have better shows.
It's going to be interesting in a way, because I remember like 9/11 really changed the live industry. Yeah. Because the live industry pretty much disappeared. But it was for very, very different reasons, right? Because people just, they were afraid to go out because they thought, they're going to get, bombed or whatever the case may be. And so then, like, a lot of markets that are a little bit smaller, like where you are and where I live, and then just stuff disappeared. I think there's going to be some of that going on, but in the bigger picture, I think there's going to be new venues that are going to sprout up, because there's just going to be a big call for people that want to be entertained.
I think you're exactly right.
I think people have watched enough Netflix to last for a couple of years, right?
No, you're right, man. And I think people are understanding, just the idea of that emotional experience, going and doing something, whether it's going to a show, whether it's going to an art gallery, whether it's going to a museum, whether it's whatever. I think people are just understanding that there is massive human value in that emotional experience of being in those four walls. And everybody moving and sweating and yelling and everything together, and that'll never go away. Like, that's just what sharing music is all about. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. It will spur on different things. The business will change a bit. Obviously, it has been for years.
For sure.
But I think you're right. There will be a lot of people going to shows, taking things in, and just needing that entertainment, outside of their own home.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of live entertainment, you created a drum festival as well.
I did, yeah. That was a thing.
Yeah, that's a very cool thing, right?
It gained, it had some legs, and it was another example of just that bravery, stupidity thing going on, and it's like, who in the right mind in the middle of nowhere goes, hey, I got an idea. Let's try to bring a bunch of the best drummers in the planet here because they'll want to come here to play at a festival. It sounds ridiculous when I hear myself say it now.
I actually don't think it's quite ridiculous. The problem with that always is like, is there enough people there that'll buy tickets for it? Because the musicians will come, and the diehards will come out, and they're probably not going to sleep well again for a couple of weeks afterwards.
Right.
But is there enough? When you're living in a smaller area, if you're not living in the big urban area, that's always the problem, right? And right. I assume that was ultimately the demise of the festival, was it? Like the festival just kind of it halted for there was a couple reasons. So in 2006, I put on a drum day called Drum and Sunday, and it was some local guys, and we did a Sunday thing, and it was just kind of to see would people come out if there was an event, and people came out, and it was cool, and I was like, okay, that was interesting. But I'm always thinking about ways to give back, just share this thing. Like I'm not trying to get more people playing drums. I'm not trying to, pad the business and go, more people have to come for lessons. It's like, no. Right. I'm just trying to share information. I'm just trying to go, You know what, guys? This is amazing that I get to play drums, and this is why it's amazing. Check it out. So 2006, we did that thing. And then, again, in my, I don't know why I do these things or make these choices, but in 2007, I think, hey, I should bring up Billy Ward, this drummer from New York who had played with Joan Osborne and Robbie Robertson and the Knack, and he's an amazing player. And I thought, let's do this. I had no idea how to do this. I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do you do? Go pick the guy up in your car in New York and drive him up here? I'm not sure. So I figured it out and brought him up. In 2008, he ended up coming up. And then in 2009, brought Kenny Aronoff here, which was kind of a crazy story. 2010, Dom Famigliero, drummer from New York, comes here to do the clinic, and we went out for dinner afterwards. And he said, so these clinics, and he's quizzing me up about the industry here, and he's just curious about what's going on. And I mentioned to him, I said, I always thought I'd like to do like a drum festival. And he said, well, why don't you just do one? And I was like, well, how do you do one? And he said, just get a couple guys, and then invite
more than
people.
one guy. Yeah, exactly, right. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's what you do. So the next year was the first drum festival, and it was Chris McHugh was in town playing with Keith Urban. Chris McHugh's a Nashville legend; he's an amazing player.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, I don't even know how or why this happened, and I've asked him. And he didn't even have an answer for it, even now, which he still keeps in touch. But Sean Pelton, who plays on Saturday Night Live, comes up from New York. I was able to get him to, and he was free. It just so happened. And so it was amazing. It was Sean Pelton,
right,
who's played on so many records that everybody's heard. It was Sheryl Crow and everybody. And Chris McHugh. So then we had the first festival, and it kind of worked out. It wasn't the best financial thing, and there was a bit of a hit there and stuff, but the idea of it was like, oh, there was a festival. Okay, great. And then from then it just kind of escalated, and I had applied for a couple of grants and got some money from the government to put the event on, which was a huge help. But it just takes so much time and stuff. And then the thing just grew like crazy. Like from 2012 to 2014, just those 3 years, it went exponentially. From the guys like Greg Bissonette and Bernard Purdy and Steve Ferroni. Yeah, it was crazy. And I look back on the list and I'm like, how did I, phone, email, Twitter, however I got a hold of these guys, and why did they even say yes? Like, what even went through their mind going, sure, we should do that? Like, obviously, they'd get paid and whatever, but I think there was more to it, and I was like, sure. How does a guy from the prairies convince Bernard Purdy, legendary Bernard Purdy, to come hang out on the prairies?
You know why? Because they're just guys, and they want to hang with other guys, and it's a mini vacation that's paid for.
Yeah, that's true. That's what it is. It became evident that it was the drum community is the reason that they said yes.
Yeah, and it's like-minded people. We get to hang out with like-minded people, and you know what? There's some, for a lot of these guys, especially when they're session guys, the adoration is always for the front person. Yeah, you're part of the package, but it's not really you, right? So exactly. I think with the Drum Fest is, I get to show off my stuff in front of my peers.
Yeah.
Right? And then they all think that I'm good, or I'm going to find out how good I am. Right?
Right.
And I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, so it just got, the thing that happened was it got real big, real fast, and then at that point was really, and it was just kind of me doing it. Like I've got a real hard time asking for help from people, so I would just take on everything, and I would do all the stuff, and it's like, man, that's a lot of work.
It's
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
There's a lot of money going out and coming in, and it's just like, holy smoke. So it just got like real big, and at the same time, in 2012. My wife and I and another couple in town, George and Julie Demas, and their son Chris Demas started a drum camp, the Stickman drum experience. So that was running at the same time, which was a 3-4 day inclusive event where everybody would stay at the same place and these drummers would come up and that. So there was a lot of activity going on, and I think it just kind of got to the point where I just needed to get some of my time back.
Yeah.
And kind of, playing was starting to get a little bit busier too. Aaron's schedule was picking up a bit, and there was other things going on here, which was fine. But I just think it was, I just needed to kind of go, you know what? I've just got to have more of. Yeah. Exactly. And it was, a really, really hard thing to kind of go, you know what? We'll put the brakes on this. So the fest or the drum camp stopped. We just said, you know what? It should just end. And there was a few reasons for that. And the Drum Fest just sort of morphed back into the one-off clinic thing. Like in 2016 or 2015, I did an education event. And there was a few guys that were involved. And then 2016, there was one clinic that I did. And so there's little bits and pieces that I still will do, but it's just not, in my mind to go full on again, which I still, sometimes in my mind I go, man, I should just do one more. I should just do one more big thing, and I'm like, or maybe not. Maybe I should just leave it how it was because maybe that's perfect. Maybe it ended just like it should have, and if I did one more, I'd end up in the mud, or something. It'd be a bad choice, and it'd be like, why did I go back?
Find some good sponsorship money and collect enough sponsorship money, and then pull off one more, and actually put some money in your jeans as well.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. Talking to people in that, and they were like, "Well, how much did you make?" And I would always be like, "Well, it didn't matter." Exactly. I would always just say, "Well, that doesn't matter." It's about this, and they're like, "Well, it kind of does." And then I'd look back and I'd go, "Oh yeah, right. It kind of does because I didn't." Yeah. For the man hours that went into it and stuff. But again, it was giving back to the community, which I know. Some of the diehards, like you said, that came to all these events, and there would be many guys that would come to all these things, and they would support it, and I'd just be like, these guys show up at everything. What's going on? Not realizing, what they're getting from this is gigantic. You know what I mean? If I was a 20-year-old kid and this stuff was going on in the city, I would have been freaking out.
We'll be talking about that 20 years from today. Right?
100%, but I was on the inside, so I wasn't really looking at it that way because I was just the guy that, was going to get towels and water and then picking a guy up at the airport and then, writing the check for this guy before he leaves town and making sure that, all his information's there for the border crossing to make sure, there's so many things like that, right? That go on,
Yeah, I'm fully aware of what's involved.
But it was, I look at it and I'm very proud of how it happened because it was kind of, again, like the music school, it wasn't planned. There was no forethought of going in 5 years I'd like to have, which maybe it should have, but maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe that's why
I don't think so. I
because
think when you do it, when you start a festival like that out, you just plan the first one, you make it as good as you possibly can. I mean, you need to make sure you got all your ducks in a row. Right, and then the next one you build on the strength of that one, right?
Yeah.
That's really what you need to do. I mean, like I ran like a bunch of annual events. I ran like a lot of comedy festivals, for example, where I always had like all the comics on it were headliners, right? I didn't have any middle acts or anything. It's like, no, this is not. I'm just bringing in the cream of the crop, and but it was like one at a time, and then I think it was like the 5th year in. So like, all right, so let's add like a nasty show. And it's like, well, if I'm going to add a nasty show, who better than the Trailer Park Boys, right?
Right. And,
And they'd never done a live performance up until that point, and Louis Thomas managed them, and Louis Thomas is the guy that manages Great Big Sea and a bunch of other people. So I knew Louis from that, and I called Louis up. It's like, I've got this crazy idea.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about it. So I said, well, and he said, like, well, let me run it by the boys, and I wrote them a pretty substantial check to come out with like no act, right? And all that they had to do was host it, and then I really stacked it with 4 of Canada's best comics. And then the Trailer Park Boys were just coming in, and the whole crowd was doing chants of this and that, and it was crazy, right? And it started a new revenue source for the Trailer Park Boys, all based on that idea, right? And actually, there's a real funny story with it. I should tell everybody. The local newspaper did like I did a contest of the local newspaper, and we did a Trailer Park Boys look-alike contest, and and people could send their picture to the paper, and the paper would run like a back page, a full page, and then go pictures, and you could go online and vote. And by the time it was all done, more people have voted for the Trailer Park lookalikes than that ever come out for any municipal election.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not.
Holy smokes!
Yeah, it's
that's
funny.
Insane.
It tells you everything about where I live.
Yeah, well, no, and you know what? There's something to be said for that. Something to be said for living not in a big center. Right. Because I think if I lived in Toronto, Montreal, LA, whatever, I don't think I would have ever thought about starting, a drum fest.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have had the resources.
Too many roadblocks, too.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have had the time because I would have been, taking every $100 gig to pay my rent.
Right.
And I wouldn't, so there's an upside to being in these places and going, hey, wait a minute, there's no such thing as a crazy idea. Let's try it. Yeah. And if you don't, another thing that's in the back of my mind is, for life is if you don't try, you suck. Because if you don't try something, you don't know. It might be the best thing you've ever done, but if you just don't try it, you'll never know.
You have to be, for sure. I totally agree, but you have to be smart about it. I mean, you got to plan out, and you got to make sure that your finances all covered. Yeah. And like those comedy festivals never made any huge amount of money, but they didn't lose a whole lot either, right?
Exactly.
Because there were like sponsorships and all that type of stuff. So, and for me, it was great because every time it was like 3 days with some of my buddies, and we just had a great time and put on some amazing shows, right? So
absolutely. I don't think that's funny that you say that because I've tried to take time to really think back to like, man, what happened at that festival? Like, what happened all weekend? And try to, because again, you're on the inside, so. You're running and you aren't seeing everything that's going on. And yeah, it was amazing just looking back and going, man, that was a really fun thing. Like just as me being a drummer, I got to take a bit of it in and really, really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah.
But it was crazy. You probably learned a lot of other things from just hanging out with all those guys that you never would have learned any other way.
Oh man, there was dealing with people, dealing with there's all these lessons outside of just them showing you a lick,
right?
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable, and then the mutual respect, right? Like I still hear from a lot of the guys that were at the festival. Like I'll get a random email or something, message from a guy or something, and it's like, oh man, right, okay, that meant something to him. Like obviously he was here and he had a good time and he liked hanging out with that guy, and that restaurant we went to, what was that called? I can't, so it was an experience for them as well. Which you don't think of it that way. You just go, okay, these guys are showing up. They're going to play. They're going to do great. Give them some money. They leave. They're on to the next thing. But it wasn't that way at all. Yeah. And there was, I don't know exactly why, but a lot of them, they had a great experience. And I think that's important for me to remember that, to go, okay.
I think partially it's probably because the way that you welcomed them in.
I think so.
I think there was has a lot to do with that, right?
Yeah, I think, I'm just communicating with them through the process and the follow-up and again, relationships, right? It's not preconceived. There was nothing that was underhanded. There was nothing that was, it was just an honest exchange of information. They got hired to do a service. They played drums. Everybody hung out. They had fun. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, I'm just a drummer goalie. I don't know.
Well, the drummer,
I'm not sure.
The drummer goalie also has a brand new project on the go, and it's not really a drum project, right? So tell us about J5B.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing. So this has actually been in the works for a while. So in high school, I really, really loved, and I know it's going to sound silly as a drummer. Well, not really, but I really loved like smooth jazz stuff. So I was a huge fan of Spyro Gyra band called Spyro Gyra, another band called the Rippingtons. That music somehow resonated with me, and a lot of people would go, it's elevator music. That's just what you hear in the shopping mall. That's what you hear, whatever. And I'd be like, oh yeah, cool, whatever, that's great. But I liked it, and there was great drummers that played in those bands and stuff, but it was all instrumental music. So I've always had like a soft side for like smooth jazz, and sort of in the chill, sort of down tempo music thing. Something like that has always resonated with me. Like I could be in a store and shopping, whether, I don't know what store it could be, Abercrombie or whatever, Le Chateau, anything, and walking around, and something about the music would just grab me, and I'm like, man, this is like in the psyche of the shopper. Like there's something about this music. They might not be paying attention, but there's something going on that's, and it's intrigued me for some reason. But as a drummer, there's no drum stuff going on, so I'm not like, oh man, check out that lick, oh check out that snare sound. It's like, no, it's just the vibe of the music. So I a few years ago started just sort of putting some ideas together. I thought, you know what, I've got some time, I might as well just do some things here in Ableton's the format I work in, and that. So I'm like, okay, great. In between other stuff, I'll just start doing this. And I started putting stuff together, and I kind of dug it, and I was like, this is cool. There was just bits and pieces. And last year I thought, you know what, I've got to get on this. This should maybe be a thing. And then in January this year, I was like, you know what, I've got to do this. I've got pieces of 3 things and a start of a 4th. I've got to do, like, I've just got to follow through on this and have a plan. So I went into it and I thought, you know what, my favorite number is 5. I'm going to do 5 songs. I'm just going to do 5 songs. And at least at some point, in my life, I can say I released some music, and it's not music anybody would ever expect me to release, because, you as a drummer, you put something out and they're like, oh man, what kit did he play? Oh yeah, it's like none. There's nothing like that at all. But I had fun playing guitar on it. I played some bass on it, played keys on it, programmed all the drums. I worked a lot on it, and it was only, what I did was I gave myself 16 tracks for each song. So I couldn't go past 16 tracks for everything. So I had to be resourceful to go, okay, if I want 2 drum tracks, I got to build a bunch of stuff in there and mix it right and stuff and whatever. So I put this together, and in the last month, have been super active getting it together. And I have a friend right now, producer friend, who does a lot of mixing and mastering. He's mastering it right now, and I'm going to release it, and I'm hoping to release it on the first day of summer, June 21st. Great. And it's called J5B, and it's called EP1, and it's 5 tunes, and it's just chill, sort of downbeat music. There's no real melodic thing going on, but to me it's interesting, and there's a lot of there's a lot of resources that use this kind of music. Like you might be on hold with the bank and maybe hear one of these tunes, or shopping,
I don't
know.
You could wish for this kind of music when you're on hold, right? Yeah. But anyway, let's have a listen here. So this is the first track. It hasn't been heard by anybody yet. It is called
nobody. It's
called Smooth, right?
Smooth 101, yeah.
Smooth 101. Let's have a listen. So this was Smooth 101, J5P. Nice stuff.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that a lot. You're actually one of the first people that's ever heard that.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's well, now a lot more people are going to hear it, which I think it should be heard. Cool, and it's going to be coming out next month, and it's going to be the usual Spotify and iTunes,
Spotify,
and all that
iTunes,
stuff.
Google Play. I'll just kind of put it everywhere, and some businesses in town, some friends. I'm going to get it on their just local playlists in their stores and stuff, and I'll just see where it goes. It's just another avenue of the industry that that I'm very curious about, because I've played on a lot of records that have been out, but haven't really released any of my own stuff, which I just love. I love just creating, and this style. There's something about this that I really dig. So I'm looking forward to just releasing another 5-song package down the road.
Yeah, and you know what? The cool thing is when you do a solo thing, then like you can literally do whatever you want.
Yeah,
right? And
there's freedom. There's freedom in that, which is nice, right?
Yeah, and you know what? There's a market for everything out there, so it's I think it's a good thing.
Good. Yeah, man. I really, that means a lot. That means a lot that you listen to it and that you still had me on.
Yeah. Yeah, like that would be like,
right. That'd be the clincher.
It was a good idea until I heard that song.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. And all of a sudden I just lost his email address. I don't know how.
That's funny. How difficult is it for you to juggle all the different aspects of your career and balance them with your family life? Because I know you're a family man too.
Yeah, you know what? That's a funny thing because it's sort of normal now. Like my wife is in the industry as well, and she teaches vocals and piano. So we're both in this together.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And so we understand kind of what's going on. You know what I mean? Like when I had to get up at 7 a.m. to do the podcast, I was pumped. And she was like, "Okay, that sounds good." But we have a work. We have a work area. But she understands how this goes. We just balance it out. We just make sure that I can do dishes and laundry and get everything going around here. But then late at night, I got time to do my thing and stuff and our schedule. The teaching. The one thing that did happen with the pandemic is all the lessons moved out of our music school, because everybody's doing online now.
Right.
And we have our garage converted into a home studio, which we did a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And now we're both teaching out of here, which is great. Like we walk 3 feet to work now, but she'll teach till 3 p.m. and I'll start at 3:30. So we tag in and out of our space here to teach. So that's a bit of a balancing act, but we make it work. We just, again, everything that we're doing is honest. There's nothing, no one's trying to do, anything that's outside of our scope of things. And the traveling, that's a bit of a balance sometimes with traveling and stuff, but it's not too crazy. Someone will get our 7-year-old to hockey if I'm not around, or, we'll figure it out. But we just communicate. I think that's the biggest thing is we just make sure each other knows. Each other knows what's going on, and we don't try to overextend things. Like it's pretty, like it's pretty easy when you're in the artistic industry to get into something, and then all of a sudden you just can't shut it off. And I think for us, we just have to be able to shut it off sometimes and go, okay, well, I'll get back to that later.
Yeah,
I can turn the laptop off now.
You have to stop yourself and say, like, okay, this can wait till tomorrow.
100%. Yeah. And that's an important thing because it's really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of it is being able to do that. And then when you are doing the thing, you're all in on it. You're not just kind of going, oh man, I'll just sit here and hang out. It's like, no, I've got 1 hour. I've got to get things done in that hour. And like you say, be organized and try to, have a plan and get things done. So
cool.
I don't know what the real answer is. That's kind of the answer, but there are, like I said before, there's always balls being juggled and things going on. But I like that. I like, if I only had one thing going on and I was to sit around, man, first of all, I'd be miserable. My wife would say, go get a gig. Like there's been times I've been around and there's been not much going on. She's like, you need to go get a gig because you're not happy right now.
Yeah.
Because she knows, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. Both of us are like that. We just want to be busy doing things, and the teaching thing is probably our busiest thing. That's the biggest energy thing we're putting our time into is the teaching, because it's the thing we're going to be doing, for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Okay. If you could change one thing about the music industry, what would that be? Man, holy smokes. That's a good one, isn't it?
That's a good question, and it's a good question to ask a drummer, because I don't know. There's a lot of I don't know. I think just maybe more equality in things. I know that I as a drummer, what I get to see as a side guy, which I love being a side guy, I get to see a whole bunch of different aspects of working with different artists, female, male, young, older. It crosses all the paths, and you sure see a lot of different ways that things happen, with, a young female artist versus, a male artist, or any, things like that. And I don't know that side of the industry well enough, but I don't know that it's all equal. Mm-hmm. And I think something like that could be maybe addressed. I think there has to be more, respect and empathy for artists. I know, obviously on social media you see a lot of people commenting and saying things that aren't the nicest. And I think that people have to understand that, like you said before, everybody's human. Everybody's got, it's all the same. It's 100% the same. So I think that, words can be very scathing. And I don't know. I just think there just has to be respect for people just trying to do something. I think that, a lot of the keyboard warriors out there are just people that don't have the guts to go try something themselves because they don't want to fail, and they can't judge someone that's out there doing it. That's just trying their best all the time, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, no, that's
a very good question, though.
Fair enough. What was the most challenging for you as you were coming up in the industry?
I think the most challenging thing that I had to learn, and I'm still learning, is just listening a lot. Just keep your mouth shut and listen, and you'll learn lessons from older players, anybody. You'll learn lessons about stuff, but stop talking and let those lessons sink in, because I think that's super valuable. This is it for anybody, any human being, but especially in the music industry, because if you're lucky enough to be surrounded by older, more experienced people in the industry, they have info, and they'll give you the info if you keep your mouth shut and listen to them.
Right. Yeah, no, very true, and you know what? It's even for me, like doing this podcast thing. One of the big things is for me, I need to listen, and so it's I'm used to being one that talks a lot as well. So you have to give the guest the room to tell their side of the story. So it's not about me. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of learning how to shut up myself, right?
Yeah,
but it's good. It's a good exercise period.
Absolutely. No, and it's just amazing how when you do listen, the 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 mouth thing. If you do listen, man, there's a lot of info out there that you could take in that could be super valuable to you as a human being, not as a musician, just to you as a human being.
100%. Yeah.
And I think that more people just need to sort of do that. And I don't know that there has to be all this noise of talking going on all the time, and that can be music too. Like sure, people listen to music, but do they really listen to music?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they like you go back
if
to the album.
If it's just background noise, or is it? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. You go back to the album thing and you go, okay, you sit down, you put an album on, and you listen to the whole side, but you actually listen. Like you're not just kind of there numb. You're taking in the whole thing. It's an experience, and I think that
you're not working on your car at the same time.
Exactly. That's right. And I think some of music has to go to that. Like I think it is an important part of every day, and people should allocate time to go, you know what, I've listened. And I do this with students all the time where, I say, well, did you listen to a lot of music this week? And they'll be like, well, I listened a bit. And I'm like, well, did you really listen? Because I'd rather have them listen to more music than even like practice sometimes. It's like, well, sure, you had your sticks in your hands, but were you really playing? But did you sit down every day for 15 minutes and like really listen to these songs?
Right.
And it's amazing how you go, oh yeah, I never heard that before in the song. It's like, now we're listening.
Yeah, for sure. What is the fondest memory you have about working in the industry?
The fondest memory, man. You know what? There's one when I was 18 years old. It's a great memory, and I didn't realize the heaviness of it until much later in life. So at 18, I was playing in a band with these older musicians that were in their 30s, and it was a country band in town, and we had a chance, and we went and played Calgary Stampede. And I was 18 and go to Calgary to Stampede. I'd never been to Stampede in my life, so I had no idea what this was all about. So we're playing at this hotel, the Hilton, and we're the country band. And then there was a pop band called the Admirals from Baltimore, Maryland, and would swap sets back and forth. So we got to do this, and we played 5-6 hours a day, which I thought was amazing. But our band played a breakfast, one of the big Calgary Stampede breakfasts. And the fiddle player that was in the band, his name was Roy Warhurst. He organized a lot of Canadian country music things, and he was a Canadian country music legend. I didn't know this. I'm 18, you know, but the other players in the band know this. So we're playing, and we get this chance. We're playing this breakfast, and we back up Wilf Carter. So in my mind, I know who Wilf Carter is because, you know, as a kid, that's what my parents listened to, but I don't realize the guy's an absolute legend. Mm-hmm. So we played this set with Wilf Carter, and you know, and there was no real rehearsal. I remember we were sitting backstage talking, and we were talking about the song, and I was saying, okay, so then the ending, how do we play the ending out? And Roy said, well, what you do for the ending is you watch Wilf Carter's right foot, and when his heel comes up, that means the song's going to end. And I was like, oh, okay. Sure, you know, 10,000 people at this breakfast, and we're playing an old country. It's like a 3/4 waltz thing, an old country thing. And sure enough, I'm not blinking because I'm watching this heel, and his heel comes up, and the song ends, and I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. So we play the whole set. Goes great. He's a wonderful human being. It was so much fun. And years later, I was telling someone this story, and they're like, you got to play with Wilf Carter? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, do you know what a big deal that is? I was like, no. And they explained it to me, and I was like, oh, geez, I kind of missed it, I guess. It was huge. And now I think back on it, I'm like, man, 18-year-old me was just so naive that maybe that served me well because I didn't get too nervous about it, because I probably would have been. If it had been me now, I'd have been freaking out.
Right.
I'd be like, man, this guy's a legend. So that's one thing that I always think back to that is kind of funny.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great story. Who's the person in the industry that had the greatest impact on you, and why?
Oh man. There's a few.
There's always more than one, for sure.
Absolutely. No, there's many. Well, Ray Bell, who we started the music school and stuff, had got me a lot of opportunities and things. My wife for being so patient. I'd say there was a gig I did in 2014. No, it was 2004. Sorry, wrong year. 2004 in Regina. It was a girl. Her name was Lisa Brokop. She was up from Nashville, and I had filled in on a gig. A friend of mine was playing guitar in the band, and I filled in on the gig. And it was just a one-off gig, playing one show. And the band leader, his name is Tom McKillop. And Tom McKillop is a Canadian country music giant. He lives in Vancouver. And he was the band leader. And the circumstances of that gig didn't end up being a lot of rehearsal. The day kind of got thrown around a little bit and stuff. And he was kind of worried about, you know, how I was going to do on the gig, because it was just a recommendation from this guitar player. And the gig wasn't a huge prestige gig, but the drummer, Craig Bignell, was the drummer that was playing the gig before me. But before him, the drummer was Mike Kennedy, who had played with George Strait for 20 years, right? And so it was, you know, there was some shoes to fill, and I knew that going into it. And on that gig, I must have done a decent job, because from 2004 forward, many years, even still now, Tom still recommends me for a lot of work, and it ended up being he ended up being a huge influence in the industry, but a friend. And he helped me with a lot of stuff, and just there's opportunities that came up through him that I never could have expected, and it was because I did a good job on that one show.
Great. I have one final question, Jayson.
Yep.
What's the dream gig?
The dream gig? Oh my goodness.
What's the one gig where you go like that? I'd love to play that gig.
Man, you know what? Let me say this: getting to make a living in the industry right now, how I do is fine. But that's not it. No, that's not it. That's not it. No, I know that's cliche, and that was an easy way out. I know. But the dream gig for me would be to get to sit in, and not even a gig. I wouldn't want to play like a whole gig, but to sit in and play a few tunes with the guys from Toto. That would blow my mind.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That would, like Lukather and Steve Porcaro and Lenny Castro. Oh yeah, no, just to sit in and just play something with those guys would be, to me, I would just go, you know what, that's because that music resonates with me too. That's a huge part of my thing.
That was a huge part of my life too. Yeah, and you know what, to me, really the drummer that stood out in Toto the most was Simon Phillips.
Yeah, Simon was great. I was a huge. Well, Picaro was so great, but Simon, he had a different thing, and he approached it differently.
Simon Phillips actually fit better into the whole thing. That's crazy that sounds, right? But his drum sound, and he produced a lot, and he had a much bigger influence on it. And ever since he's been gone, I mean, they've had some some great players like Keith Carlock, but you know what? There is the old candle thing, right?
yeah, absolutely. Simon brought a thing though. Like there was those records that he played on. They ended up being. They're great records. They're fantastic records. Absolutely. And he played, when he played in the band, when he was able to be Simon Phillips,
right? When
he played on the records, I dug that. I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And he was a great replacement because it wasn't just a guy that was sounding like Jeff.
No, he did his own thing.
Exactly. And Simon and Steve Lukather had a history, with stuff, and they, and I think that musically he was a fit. But just that band is so good, and the music they play, and they're still playing.
The musicality of those guys is off the charts, right? Yeah.
It's beyond, and all the stuff they played on. Like when I was a kid, I was infatuated with the whole studio guy thing, and seeing guys' names on multiple records and going, how do they Michael McDonald, Steely Dan, Boss. What is it the same guy? Can a guy do that? That's crazy.
Yeah.
And that just sort of led me down that path of going, you know what, this band is pretty special because there's not much they can't. If you can have guys play on a Steely Dan record and then play on the Michael Jackson record, the biggest record of all time, I don't know. I think that says something.
It sure does. Well, Jayson, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you. Thank you for coming on.
This made my day.
Well, you're welcome. It's nice that you were part of the conversation. What's the best way for people to connect with you? Do you have a website? Or
no, you know what? My website a couple years ago, it was just a lot to maintain, so I have to get that back up in a simpler form for me to manage it. But social media, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook.
What's the handle on Instagram?
Instagram is Jay's Drums, JayzDrumz, and just my name, Jayson Brinkworth with a Y and Jason on Facebook. Yeah, and you can find me, and it's there's no offensive postings. It's all pictures of gear, some tunes that are going on, and pictures of my 7-year-old and our pets.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you on the flip side.